What's up everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Colby Covington goes off on Garry in interview. On the heels of a lopsided loss to Leon Edwards last year, Colby Covington has set his sights on a big return in 2024. The former interim welterweight champion seems to be keeping an eye on the upcoming fight between Garry and Geoff Neal at UFC 298, after finding himself on the Irish contenders hit list for the year. During a recent episode of Submission Radio, Covington name-dropped 3 opponents for his next fight, naming Gilbert Burns and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson as 2 other potential opponents alongside Garry.
If he can get through the busboy and UFC deems that to be the biggest and best business the UFC can do in the welterweight division, then let's do it. The UFC knows what Colby Chaos Covington is about. Boy, we got Gilbert coming up, that fat lesbian, just like Conor said. He's coming up in March. If he beats that other kid that he's fighting, whatever the scrub's name is, then that's a possibility. I think Wonderboy guys make the most sense. The ultimate nice guy versus the ultimate bad guy.
Covington notably called out Stephen Thompson following his loss to Leon Edwards, while sidestepping the idea of a fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov. Between Thompson, Garry, and Burns, there's certainly no shortage of contenders for Covington to face when he returns to action. Next up, let's take a look at Sean O'Malley reveals UFC plans after Chito Vera fight. Sean O'Malley has indicated in the past that he has little interest in competing against featherweight kingpin Alexander Volkanovski. As he explained last year, Volkanovski is the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, and although he's confident that he can knock anyone out, he knows how difficult of a fight the featherweight champ brings to the table. Heading into UFC 298, however, O'Malley and featherweight title challenger Ilia Topuria have expressed an interest in fighting one another if Topuria emerges victorious from his fight with Volkanovski. Speaking in a recent episode of Demetrius Johnson's Mighty Cast, O'Malley outlined his plan after fighting Chito Vera at UFC 299.
Yeah, I want to become champ. Ilia just has that face that I would love to knee him right up the middle and break his little nose. I'd like to do that. So that's that. I'll probably head out to California and watch that fight. Ilia versus Volk, gonna be a sick fight.
Oh yeah.
When I think of who's like some of the most skilled fighter that I've ever watched, Ilia's up there.
Of course, O'Malley will first have to make it through Chito Vera, who remains the only fighter to defeat O'Malley inside the octagon. The way the champ sees things, however, despite the bad blood between them, Vera doesn't really deserve a crack at the belt.
He's lucky I'm in this position. He wouldn't be getting a title shot off this Pedro performance. I still haven't watched it. I just assume it was pathetic, so I guess I can't say that. But yeah, he wouldn't be getting a title shot off that, I'm assuming. There's too many guys. It's just because of the history, so you're welcome.
Heading into the fight, O'Malley sits as a pretty heavy betting favorite despite his previous loss to Vera, indicating that the MMA community is confident he can get the job done this time around. Next up, let's take a look at Alexander Volkanovski breaks silence on Islam Makhachev fight. When Charles Oliveira fell out of his fight with Islam Makhachev, it didn't take long for featherweight kingpin Alexander Volkanovski to step in on short notice in hopes of getting his revenge on Makhachev for their UFC 284 clash. After being knocked out in the first round, Volkanovski admitted backstage following the event that he wasn't in a good place before taking the short notice fight, and as a result, felt as though he simply had to seize the opportunity. Heading into his UFC 298 clash with Ilia Topuria, Volkanovski has opened up on some of his habits leading up to the fight, while speaking with David Adesanya on the Freestyle Bender YouTube channel.
I'm known for being disciplined professional all year round, 24/7. And I just wasn't that time, so I was really disappointed, and I was more upset with who I was than previous months leading into that. And to be honest, it made it a little bit easier because it snapped me out of it. You know what I mean? It snapped me out. I was drinking every day for like 3-4 weeks. Like honestly, I don't even know if I've got that. Like that's unheard of for me. Like every day, like I've never ever done that.
As Volkanovski also indicated, his knockout loss to Makhachev saw him sustain a concussion, which he felt the effects from in the week after the bout. Now, as he gears up to fight Ilia Topuria, he'll be looking to defy the odds and become the first 35-year-old to win a title fight under 155 pounds. Next, let's take a look at Conor McGregor called out in interview. the MMA community has continued to anxiously await news regarding when former champ Conor McGregor will return to the octagon in 2024. While it's continued to look as though he will compete against Michael Chandler, featherweight title challenger Ilia Topuria recently took aim at the Irish star in hopes of setting up a future fight with McGregor. On the heels of Topuria indicating that the UFC is expected to host an event in Spain this year, the #1 contender called out McGregor during a recent appearance on the MMA Hour.
Yeah, he has a great fight. His upcoming fight is with Mike Chandler. If he doesn't get his whooped, he will be pleasure to share the octagon with me and maybe in UFC Spain. We both from Europe, and he will be able to bring back home and tell to his wife, baby, take out the red panties, Topuria keep us rich.
Of course, as previously mentioned, Topuria is targeting a fight with bantamweight champion Sugar Sean O'Malley should he emerge victorious from UFC 298. Given that and his call out of McGregor, it's clear that El Matador is casting a wide net in order to set himself up for some big fights if he leaves California with gold around his waist. On the flip side, there's been little word regarding McGregor's return to the octagon since the Irish star announced that he and Michael Chandler would be fighting in June. With Dana White stating that nothing is finalized, it seems as though the details are still up in the air. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at UFC Fight Updates. With Fight Week underway for the Hermansson vs. Pyfer card at the Apex, let's take a look at today's UFC Fight Updates, starting with a new addition to the UFC Fight Night Atlantic City card on March 30th, which will reportedly see Melissa Gatto and Victoria Dudakova compete in a flyweight bout that will see Gatto look to snap a 2-fight skid and pick up her first win since 2021. While Dudakova will look to build on an undefeated record that includes 2 victories inside the octagon. This week also saw a number of fighters removed from the UFC roster. According to UFC Roster Watch, 3 fighters have been removed from the roster. First up, we have Juan Camilo Honderos, who had 2 fights in 3 years and suffered first-round submission losses in both of them. In addition, Albert Duraev was also removed from the roster after withdrawing from 3 of 5 canceled fights, including his upcoming UFC Vegas 86 bout this weekend. Last but certainly not least, middleweight Phil Hawes was also reportedly released amid a 3-fight skid that most recently saw him KO'd by Bruno Ferreira last month on the Ankalaev vs. Walker 2 card. Next, let's take a look at Shara Magomedov calls out Marvin Vettori next. After making his successful UFC debut last year against Bruno Silva, Sharabuddin Magomedov has his sights set on a big step up in competition this year. The undefeated prospect has emerged as a notable up-and-coming fighter in the UFC's middleweight division, finishing all but 2 of his professional wins. Speaking in a recent interview with Red Corner MMA, Magomedov called out former title challenger Marvin Vettori, who's gearing up for an April showdown with Brendan Allen in the hopes of bouncing back from a lopsided decision loss to Jared Cannonier over the summer.
Что он является топ-5 UFC рейтинге, да? Мне абсолютно ничего не говорит. Я когда буду его бить, мои кулаки, мои локти, мои голени не будут спрашивать, в каком рейтинге находится.
While some members of the MMA community indicated in the replies that Vettori's wrestling would likely be too much for Magomedov, as previously mentioned, Vettori's next fight will see him compete against streaking contender Brendan Allen. With an impressive 6-fight win streak to his name that most recently saw him defeat Paul Craig, Brendan Allen is hopeful that with a win over Marvin Vettori, his case for a crack at the belt will be undeniable. Given that, it's unclear where Magomedov fits into the picture. Next, let's take a look at Jiri Prochazka talks about his next UFC fight. Back in November, former light heavyweight champion Jiri Prochazka returned to action in hopes of reclaiming the title he never actually lost inside the octagon. Unfortunately for the Czech samurai, the fight saw him finished in the second round, marking his first loss inside the octagon. As Prohaska revealed recently, he went into the fight after battling a staph infection and was not able to train or compete at 100%. Ahead of his UFC 300 fight with Alexander Rakic in April, Prohaska is eager to showcase his growth as a fighter. He spoke in a recent interview with Low Kick MMA.
He's 50-50. He's a good wrestler. He's really strong guy, I think. And his stand-up is not best, but like I said, he's a 50-50. Good striker, good wrestler. And I'm ready for both. I want to realize the mastery, not just in the training, not just like in the daily life, repeat, be better. But in the cage, to show it in the cage, that's what I want. Maybe that's the answer. That's what I want to show.
While Prohaska will be eager to showcase his growth, Aleksandar Rakic is eager to make a successful return to action after over a year and a half away from the octagon following a knee injury sustained in his 2022 fight with Jan Blachowicz. Heading into the bout, the MMA community seems incredibly split right down the middle, with Prohaska sitting at -105 odds, while Rakic sits at -125 on DraftKings. As both men look to return to title contention, the stakes couldn't be higher. The MMA community goes off on Colby Covington after he claimed that his foot broke during his fight with Leon Edwards. Here's what the community had to say. Colby Covington right after the fight. I won, but the judges wouldn't give it to me because they hate Trump. Colby Covington now. See, what had happened was I broke my foot and that's why I lost. He also can't make his mind up on when his foot broke. I guess you need options. Maybe one day he will pass a mirror and see the real reason he lost. Till then, blame everyone and everything but himself. It's New American way. I don't have any interest in seeing that fight again. I don't care if he got hurt. He's older now and the fights suck. Just give him some fun matchups for him to close out his career on. Colby ain't getting a rematch anytime soon, buddy. The fight wasn't even competitive. He needs to at least beat a Shavkat level opponent before there's any hype for him fighting for a title again. Took him 3 months for an X-ray, LMAO. Sore feet and it was rigged. A unique Venn diagram of a US president avoiding the draft and losing an election being the same as a UFC fighter bitching about a fight he lost. Top comments. Strickland needs to be in the rematch for UFC 300. He deserves it. Ariel's just mad Dana hates him. Definitely cheering for the fighters in the UFC lawsuit. Will always support the fighters over the greedy UFC suits. They needed to give Poirier more money to fight him. He ain't taking that beating for cheap. Make sure to leave a comment and you might get featured in our next video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss any MMA news. Check out our video from yesterday if you missed it. See you tomorrow.